All right, welcome back, everybody. Today, instead of just me, you got me and Doug. Doug has been a sci-fi fan about as long as I have, but Doug's a year or two younger, so I got there first, just by age. So,
Fair, fair, fair.
um,
You've probably been a Trekkie. Well, you've probably been a Trekkie longer than me as well, I would say, right? Because I'll tell you, I didn't really start until Next Generation, and then went back to the old series and fell in love with that. So I wasn't traditionally, old series and the next gen, et cetera. I was, DS9, et cetera. I was started with the next gen and then went back to the original series and the original.
so my sci-fi world started with Star Wars because I was sort of five-ish when it came out. It came out in '77, and my dad took me to see it because I bugged him, apparently. So the story goes. And that just sort of got me into sci-fi. And then, of course, Battlestar Galactica was that thing that was on every week that you watched with dad because you only had one TV and three channels. And then I kind of got into Star Trek after that in reruns. But for me, Star Trek's always been really hit or miss, right? It when it hits perfectly. When it misses, you're like asleep 10 minutes in, and that's that, right? And I know that's sort of forbidden for Trekkies to say that sort of thing, but it is because if you look at like the difference between like the Wrath of Khan, which we're going to talk about here in a second. Wrath of Khan, in my head, is one of the best science fiction movies I've ever seen. Okay, which is directly the opposite of Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which is one of the worst science fiction movies I've ever seen. Right, so you go from I'm asleep 10 minutes into Wrath of Khan, which they were completely different, sort of the way they came out because the original series or the motion picture was everybody was very stiff and wooden. The only person that showed any emotion was Scotty, and I think he was drunk half the time because he's Scotty. But in the second one, I posted on Twitter that we were going to do this video, and somebody pointed out that there's a story running around that the director in Wrath of Khan told William Shatner to go full Shatner, and then just throughout the entire movie, and they would just take the least Shatner cut of every scene, and that's the one they used.
I
And I'm like,
mean, it's iconic though, right? Khan. I mean, that's what
yeah,
everybody remembers. You don't forget that. So
yeah, and Shatner when he goes full Shatner is it's a lot of Shatner. But
yeah.
I don't know if there's any truth to that story or not. Somebody would have to go ask Mr. Shatner that, and he's not going to answer my call. So we'll maybe I can call some of the next generation group and see if that they can go find out.
Let's get that Twitter account following up even up to 20 or 50K.
Hey, I've actually had I've got some connections in Hollywood. I've got some people I'm connected to on social media that are in Hollywood that might be able to find out. So who
I'm
knows?
saying maybe you'll get to the great William Shatner when with a few more followers, but you're doing pretty good already.
I think the odds of that are about the same as me getting a dinner date with Drew Barrymore, but we'll see how it
That's another video, and we're gonna make that happen.
goes. All right, so
Um,
let's dive into this thing. So Wrath of Khan is the second. You can see my screen, right?
yes, yeah, it's a
All right. So Wrath of Khan, the second in the Star Trek series, is really a movie about that came out because of one of the it was sort of a extension of one of the episodes. So, they got Ricardo Montalban, who was in the original series on one episode. He and Kirk went at it. The concept is that Khan is a genetically modified individual. So there was some DNA experimentation going on to see if you could build a better human by sort of messing with the DNA. And you wound up with this group of people who were super intelligent, super strong, could live a long time, really didn't suffer from disease. It's kind of an interesting idea, right? If you could do that, and do it effectively without creating crazy people. What parent wouldn't say, "Hey, I'm going to have a child, and can we modify it so everybody's crazy healthy?" That would be kind of neat, right? But it's sort of like playing God, but at the same time not, right? But anyway, completely different subject. Could you modify the DNA of somebody? So let's think about the science of that for a second. Could you modify the DNA of somebody and make it so that they didn't have a disease? Well, there are people working on which sections of DNA actually cause which forms of cancer, cause which forms of whatever. And can you go in and give it proteins, and can you go in and give it things to suppress that part of the DNA? That research is being done with some success right now today. And it's how they actually solved some of the rheumatoid arthritis problems and delivered a medication that causes people with really bad cases of arthritis to not have as big a problem. They actually go in with some proteins that attach to DNA and suppress certain things, and it actually works pretty well. So that's happening. So could you build a superhuman?
So you're telling me that there are studies and there are that have happened where they're modifying DNA of living human beings and it's not killing them right away or causing. I mean, maybe there's. I'd be interested to know what the other negative effects are, but it's
Well,
happening today, is what you're saying.
it's happening in white mice. There's a guy down at UT Southwestern named Bruce Beutler who actually studies DNA, and he studies it in white mice, and he purposely damages different DNA strands of white mice to figure out which parts of the DNA are responsible for what. And he won the Nobel Prize for his work in arthritis, the Nobel Prize in medicine. And I've had dinner with him a couple times. Really brilliant guy. And I shot him an email about this. He's like, "Sure, you could do it." And he sent me 50 different articles about them actually finding DNA markers that cause pancreatic cancer and all these other things. And like, can you actually go in and suppress that DNA marker in a way that your likelihood of developing that cancer is much lower? And those are the kinds of things they're showing to be very possible in white mice, and that's going on today. Right. So in another 100 years, could we do this? Sure. Here's the rub, right? When you're a scientist, you always look at, hey, I did this. What other effect, right? You have some cause and effect. Is it only going to impact the part that says no pancreatic cancer? Or is it also going to do something else? Hey, this is the part that makes somebody super smart. Okay, now we're modifying the brain. Does it also make them a narcissist? Does it also make them an egomaniac? Does it also make them so that they can justify killing, millions of people because it's the right thing to do? You know, think about the end of Avengers, right? So he wanted to kill half the population because of overpopulation, right?
The
So
Rise of the Planet of the Apes. They were doing the DNA testing to combat Alzheimer's, right? And that
right.
turned into the what do they call it, the monkey virus or the ape virus or whatever that killed everybody.
Yeah. So could you do it? Technically, I don't see a reason why you couldn't. Is it a brilliant idea? The jury's still out, right? So my inner scientist wants to go, absolutely, let's go do it. But my inner skeptic goes, I don't know, man.
Well, and back to point here with the movie, Bones asks that exact question in Wrath of Khan. He says, we're here, we are creating life, playing God. Should we be doing this? Are we intelligent enough I think the line is, are we intelligent enough to be doing this? And I don't think he means that in terms of like, are we capable? It's a, should we be doing this? Is this morally correct or ethically sound?
Have we really thought through this? I mean, what could be
Right.
the downside here, right?
Right.
Because could go the wrong way. Um, but anyway, so that's an interesting point they bring up, but it's fun. So I had to give a shout out to one thing on this movie. Ricardo Montalban, I had to look it up, was 62 years old when they filmed this without CGI. Okay,
And you
and
look at
he claims there was no plastic surgery involved. I don't know if I buy off on that or not, but the fact that he looked like that at 62, I got to go with, damn, dude, seriously.
I mean, this was 82, so how good would the plastic surgery have been at the time? And he was definitely in shape. He was still this was still at the height of Fantasy Island, right? So he had to keep
Yeah.
fit. He was on TV every week, But I mean,
I,
yeah, amazing physical specimen. I don't know if I can get there by 62. That's a little about a decade, a little bit more than a decade away from me. And
I don't think I looked like that when I was in the army. I mean, come on, man. It's just like, seriously, this dude was ripped, and I think his thing was he wanted to fit, in the storyline. He's this exact perfect specimen of a human being that's been modified to be this way, and he's like, I better portray that. So he took it to heart, man. He busted his ass, and I mean, they could have fixed it with costuming, they could have fixed it with camera angles, but he's like, nope, we're gonna do it the old-fashioned way. And I'm pretty sure that involved a whole lot of baked chicken, no bread ever, and a lot of time in the gym.
yeah,
Because
weightlifting specifically, right? To get those pecs up,
wow.
those arms up. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it would have taken to get there, but the fact that he did it, I am impressed. So one of the people on Twitter asked about the earbuds, right? So part of the storyline is Khan has been marooned on this planet, and nobody checked on him and his people because, in the original storyline, Kirk was having problems with Khan, and he's like, okay, fine, you guys are smart. We're not gonna put you in jail because you've broken all these laws anyway. We're just gonna put you on this planet. There's a chance for life. Go, right? Have fun. Um, go be farmers or whatever. And the original neighboring planet exploded, turning the planet he was on into this desert landscape that was really hard to survive on. And Khan's justifiably pissed, right? Because nobody came back to check on him over time, and the only living indigenous creature from that planet, which has not seen a starship since the original series, so it's years later. And all of a sudden, one comes down looking for a planet that's devoid of any life, and they find Khan and his group, and it happens to be magically somebody that Khan actually knew, who was out with Kirk at the original time. Statistically, the odds of that are around
Actually,
absolute
that's a whole
zero.
other thing. That's a whole other thing. Chekhov actually wasn't in that whole season, let alone in that episode. So
Yeah,
it's a big thing with Trekkies, right? How can this be? But we let it go,
we'll
suspend
let that
it.
part go for just a minute. And,
Yeah,
and what are the odds that somebody who knew Kirk and knew of that mission would sound on that planet? Absolute zero, right?
yeah,
But we're
yeah.
going to
So
let
you
that
can
part go. So
right.
scientific impossibility. But we like it because it's the original guys and it's Chekhov, and we got to get to part 4 when he was looking for the nuclear vessels in California. But at the height of the Cold War. But these creatures, so Khan, of course, jumps at this opportunity to go get back at Kirk, and he puts these creatures inside these guys' ears. So, Doug, I dug into the science of this one. I'm going to let you take a shot at. What do you see wrong with this whole thing?
I mean, what is this thing? It's an armadillo with the scorpion with the crab mixture going on, and I'm not aware of any species that actually has multiple scales that sheds its offspring through there. So that kind of throws me. Um,
Well, I look at that earbug that's supposed to go inside the ear. I'm not sure that thing's going to fit.
oh yeah, I mean that's pretty huge. So and then let's also say it makes it in there. It's got to tear. It's got to perforate the eardrum if it's going to get into the brain. So now the person's hearing's never going to be the same.
It's got to wrap itself around something. There's a whole lot of things that went on that I just kind of was like, okay, I don't buy off of this. But scientifically, could you find, let's forget the creature for a second. So let's just say Khan wants to control somebody's brain. Well, we ran experiments back in the 60s and 70s through MK Ultra. The Russians ran a few that were all about mind control. Could you give somebody an injection, a drug? Could you do something to somebody that would actually make them susceptible to sort of suggestion, right? Hey, look, I want you to go kill yourself in this following way, and can you actually get them to do that? Can you convince somebody that, can you convince one of our soldiers that they actually are Russian, and then you send them to Russia and then deprogram them later and bring them back? Can you do mind control? Is that possible? And some people can consider that John Malkovich's character in Red was somebody who underwent that, and I think he played that very well. But that's a whole different video. But if you look at it, we have toyed around with this idea of can it be done? I think if we're going to do it, it'd have to be some kind of chemical. And if it was a creature, it would have to be some kind of venom, maybe. I've never heard of a venom doing that. It is sort of advanced chemistry to get there, but in the vastness of the universe, is there a creature that has a venom that will let you do mind control? Yes, it's possible, but it's about as likely as somebody who knew Khan beaming down to the surface and just accidentally bumping into him. So
I mean, like what are the stuff what's the truth serum injections that are supposedly out there, right? Like
sodium
so
pentothal.
get sodium pentothal. Okay. Yeah, I think I've heard of one called Veritas serum or something like that. Veritas, like Latin Veritas serum.
Yeah.
Um
And
scopolamine. But yeah, so could there be an animal that actually excretes this? Or, that's a question. I don't know that there is. I mean, that's what it
possibly, I mean, chemistry is a funny thing. I'm not going to go off and purposely get bitten by every venomous animal to test that. Right. But my tarantula did bite me one day, and that hurt. But we'll stop at that, right? It mistook my hand. I stupidly tried to feed my tarantula with a cricket in my hand, and things got out of hand. Um, I thought it was cute. Anyway, so is this possible? With a bug like this? No, like 16 different things. Like it's too big. It's just not, a whole lot of stuff doesn't work here.
yeah,
Could
I mean,
Khan
I
do
would
it
think
with some chemistry? Maybe.
if we're taking the stretch, maybe through the nose.
Yeah, maybe through the nose, right? But I don't see this as viable in any way. But it was a great way to move the story forward and kind of get the Khan, if he's going to take over, if he's going to take down Kirk, who by the way Khan's pissed that Kirk's an admiral. I think you had to have a storyline somewhere, and they just kind of came up with one, and
He's
It
pissed.
kind of
He's an
works.
admiral. He blames him for the death of his wife because of
It,
the explosion and never checking
it,
on him. Yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
I mean, Khan's justifiably pissed, right?
Mhm.
Um, so anyway, now the other fun part is once Khan takes over the USS Reliant, he beamed up and took over this sort of exploratory ship and faked a communication accident to get close to Kirk and blow out part of the Enterprise. But of course, one big happy fleet. They all know each other, and he knows exactly where to hit him. So, is this possible scientifically? Sure. I mean, it bears Kirk just has to see Reliant as a friend and not put up his shields, right? But this brought a question to my head. Why don't the Klingons just start building shit that looks like the Enterprise instead of a bird of prey and just fly in to Starfleet headquarters?
Well, I think part of the argument again with that would be, that these ships have electronic signatures, if you will.
Mhm.
They have they're not just from view, but I'm sure that they have some sort of way that they identify each other with each other electronically. Think about what happens later here, where he's able to lower the shields on Reliant using his authoritative codes, right? It's because the
Yeah.
ships actually talk to each other through whatever kind of network they've got going on there. So
That's fair, but it lent itself to the question of if you have all that connectivity and you could get, ships, computers talking to each other, they shouldn't have fallen for it's a communication problem, right? They shouldn't have had that kind of issue. It should have been pretty easy. Oh, just send a text message.
well, and again, lucky that the Enterprise, we've seen this so many times, was the only ship in the quadrant,
Yeah,
right, to actually go check it out. And that, he's also on a ship full that was supposed to be on a training mission with a bunch of trainees, right? So he's really not even supposed to be there, let alone the Enterprise be there.
that's right.
He's not even supposed to be on the ship. But
Yeah, well, it's Kirk also, so he kind of like muscled some admirals into sending because
yeah,
he's
I mean,
he's tired of being on Earth. Uh,
Savick clearly called him out too when he rolled up on the Reliant. Hey, regulations say we need to raise our shields, and he just looks at her, doesn't
yeah,
say anything, and then moves on. I'm like, dude.
yeah. First off, when somebody says put your shields up because there's a communication issue, you put your shields up, dude. Come on, Kirk. I get he deserved to be busted down to captain after that because he just completely screwed it up. I mean, everybody looks at him getting busted back down to captain as a good thing because he was so much better as a captain than an admiral. But he shouldn't even stayed a captain after this shit, right? He should have been busted all the way down to like, retired. That's it, sir. You're out, right? Go retire by the lake. Have a nice day. Let somebody else take over from here because you obviously are an idiot. Without Scotty, this ship doesn't make it home.
The underappreciated Scotsman engineer. Yes, absolutely.
Underappreciated. That's right. I love Scotty, man. If I had to pick anybody from the original cast to go drink with, it would have been Scotty in a minute. Um, Mostly because I think he would have drunk me under the table. But anyway, so the no discussion of this, the science of this can be complete without the Project Genesis. All right. So Genesis, the idea behind it was, can you find a lifeless rock in space and turn it into something that can support life? Can you terraform? Can you turn something into from lifeless to possessing life? I dug into this one pretty hard. It within certain conditions, the theory is that you have to have a certain set of things to support life on planets. Life as we know it. Let's specify that, right? There might be types of life we don't know because it's a big universe, but let's just go with life that as we know it. You have to have a planet that roughly approximates the size of Earth. Can't be bigger, can't be too much smaller, otherwise the gravity doesn't work out correctly. You don't hold an atmosphere properly. You also have to have the right chemistry. Okay, so the right chemistry has to be in place in order for life to show up, in order for an atmosphere to form, in order for water to form. So if they actually got this one kind of right. Okay, so they don't tell you how Genesis works, and we're gonna to let them just gloss over that fact because otherwise the movie would have
Sure.
been 10 hours long trying to explain it. But the point is that they were taking great effort, and Chekhov was even getting annoyed at the beginning, going, "Okay, we found another lifeless hunk of rock that sort of is right for all your parameters." So they're out looking for something that has a very specific set of parameters. And Chekhov was getting really frustrated that they couldn't find something that was exactly perfect for the Genesis device. And the reason was you got to have the right size, you got to have the right distance to the sun, you got to have all these, the right sort of core, you got to have all these other conditions to support life as we know it. If all those things were there, All you need now is the right chemistry. So if we take the assumption that Project Genesis really just accelerated that chemistry with some future technology we don't completely have, you're kind of there. My guess is it's nuclear with sort of transporter devices that can sort of create things, but you're
The
kind of
only
there.
other thing I'm thinking of is you talk about the planet's sizing and the chemistry, right? Like,
Mhm.
doesn't it need a neighboring solar star, right? Like, basically to stimulate the life, like it needs to be
You got
rotating
to
around the
have
sun.
you got to have the correct kind of star. Got to be the right distance to that star. You got to have all kinds of stuff, right? And those conditions have to be sort of perfect. And there's even an argument that can kind of sort of terraform Mars at a certain extent, but I'm not sure I believe those arguments completely because it's too far out. But the size is right, but it's too far out, really. Maybe. But the point is, could it be done if all the other conditions are met? Could you accelerate terraforming? Terraforming, probably not by technology we have, certainly not at this speed, but could it be done with some great industrial effort? Yeah.
Yeah, see,
Um,
I had this first thought when watching if you remember Aliens, I had this
mhm.
first thought when watching that thing, because they terraformed that colony with atmospheric processors, and the same thing kept coming back to my mind. Okay, great, maybe there's a scientific, I'll let it slide, suspend my disbelief on the chemistry and what they're pumping into the atmosphere. But again, as far as I was always taught, it really relies on that the sun. What are the three basics of life? You need the sun, you need water, and you need a breathable atmosphere. I'm talking about human life specifically, but
Well, our sun is really a G2 spectral class star, which is fairly common. They're all over the place. So is it possible for us to go out and find a rock about the right space away from its sun from Mars? Probably. If we have a warp drive, sure. We've actually found some, there's been astronomers that have identified planets that are the right size in the Goldilocks zone surrounding other stars inside our galaxy. So, is it possible for us to go do it? Sure. Is it possible for us to find one that the conditions are exactly right? Sure. Is it also possible for the scientists that built Genesis to be so picky about the size rock that it frustrates Chekhov? Sure. Because what they're looking for is the exact right set of conditions, the exact distance from the star, the correct type of star, the right temperature conditions, all these other things. And if you found all that, and then you had this other little device that sort of magically created all that crap you need, okay, I kind of buy off.
sure. And I mean,
So
to suspend disbelief, that's what Reliant was supposed to be doing, scouting worlds that would be possible for this phase three. The first other two phases they've already passed. The second one being seen in the movie where they go underground to that garden that they grew in a day, right? They
mhm.
had a controlled environment where they could apply their experiments, right, from theory to actual, implementation and see it happen. So, all right, there was enough explanation, not too much, but enough to let me buy into it. So.
Yeah, and the thing I like about it is basically they go far enough to say, look, what Genesis does is it takes the existing matrix that's there and replaces it with a whole new one. So this means two things. Number one, it's a type of technology we don't really completely understand because it's far off in the future. The end goal they could get to, but it also makes this the best weapon ever, right? Because if you're going to go replace whatever's there with something new, you could take a planet full of, like, we got what, 7 billion people on the planet now, it's like whatever it is. If you come up with something like this, we're just going to go replace it. The entire life on this planet as we know it, including whales, are all gone,
Which
replaced with
is,
something else.
yeah, which is what David, the spoiler alert, Kirk's son,
Mhm.
really brought forth. He's like, he's got this real view as a scientist of Starfleet as warmongers, or very militaristic view. Like they are the military. They're the evil government that's going to take over control and use everything for their own purpose. And he voices that concern about this could be perverted and used as a weapon. Exactly what
Mhm.
you're talking about. Not to go too far down the rabbit hole here, but Roddenberry's vision of Trek was always one of a socialistic society, right? Everybody working for the common good. We've gotten past the need for money and competition, which argue that where you take that argument where you will, the merits of competition. But this was kind of against Roddenberry's original vision, and that shows through because as much as I've reverence for the great Gene Roddenberry. He was very much a proponent behind Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and on this one, he was reduced to creative consultant, and they brought in the television crew, Harv Bennett and a bunch of those guys to make this movie on time and under budget, with a newer director. and it just so happens to be one of the and all the things and a lot of things that are anti-Trek. The costumes are were updated for this. I think they're pretty cool costumes, but they're very much based on military costumes. It would first Trek movie ever where Kirk boards a ship or high-ranking official boards a ship and they blow a whistle. That's straight out of the Navy. Even though I was never in Trek before, and so Roddenberry set out to make it more of David's vision, if you will, that socialistic society all working for the common good. And as that started to go to there, it kind of fell off, and then or didn't draw as much popularity. I'll say that our wider audience, and then they kind of brought this back into more an adversarial thing.
This one became more action and less, conference room discussion.
Well,
right?
we had an actual villain. I mean,
Yeah.
V'ger, I know, was the antagonist of Star Trek the Motion Picture, but you never see. There's no face to V'ger. There's no emotion to V'ger. There's nothing.
That was just fear of the unknown. Here we got
Khan
a bad guy.
is a classic villain. You understand his motivation. You understand his passion. It is Khan versus Kirk, right? I mean that's going to draw an audience in much more than some nameless, faceless. What's going on out here?
I'm sorry. I still think that Montalban's pecs were worth 10 million opening weekend, but still.
I'm sure it was a lot cheaper than all the CG or all the animated stuff they did, or all the the motion capture they did with in the motion picture.
Absolutely certain of that. So two things left before we run out of time. One is, of course, it's a 40-year-old movie, so I'm not giving anything away. At the very end of it, Kirk thinks he's won because he's come back and he's kind of blown up Reliant. Of course, Khan releases Genesis on the planet that he was on, which turns it into a life form. But the reason Khan does that was Kirk basically took out the entire Reliant crew, which was all of Khan's people. Khan sort of lived long enough to blow up Genesis, which of course Kirk didn't think he was going to get away because the ship was so damaged he couldn't go to warp speed. And that brings us to the very end of the movie where somebody had to go in where there was a giant radiation leak and fix it. Nobody had time to get suited up. You couldn't go in there, you would die. So of course, Spock being Spock is like, all right, I'm going in, I'm going to fix it. Of course, Spock winds up.
The theme of the movie rings through generations, the needs of the many.
These are the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, right? Which of course sets up the next film, which I'll do another video on probably next week or so. But it's interesting to me that they really did kind of think through some of the science on this. At least they didn't really dig into it, but if you really kind of look at it, especially with Genesis, it kind of you can kind of get there with the genetic modification stuff. You can kind of get there with the bug doing the mind control stuff. No, I'm not buying it, right? But if you look at it, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. The only other thing that's really left is transporters and warp drive. And just to reiterate from another video I did, transporters were a shortcut Gene Roddenberry came up with to save time on television. They do not exist, despite people I've had people come up to me in real life with conspiracy theories that we have colonies on Mars that we're sending food to using our existing transporters. It's not true. Don't buy off on that. And the other one is warp drive. And warp drive is actually sort of based in a scientific principle where you warp space to make 2 points closer together instead of far apart, in which case it moves. And then the only argument I have with warp drive is every time they're at warp speed, they show the ship doing something funny, and really you should show the stars doing something funny and the ship moving really slow. But besides that, we'll let that part go. Warp drive is its own video all by itself. So I hope everybody had a great time with this one. Doug's probably going to come back for part 3, I hope, when we do the search for Spock. And I am doing intense research because somebody asked for me to do on the movie Interstellar. But it turns out the science of that one is like a 20-page PowerPoint to even come close to trying to explain, because they went deep on that thing. And by the way, everything in Interstellar, a little preview of coming attractions, every bit of science in Interstellar absolutely holds water with current theory. A lot of it hadn't been proven, but it does hold water with current theory all across the board. The trouble is it's really complicated theory, so to explain it, it's taken some time to figure out. Anyway, Doug, thanks. Everybody hit like, subscribe, follow, if you want to. And remember, all of our videos, or all my videos, are put out through the One for All social system. Check it out, o4a.com. Doug is the chief operating officer. I'm the chief wizarding officer, which is basically like the chief technology officer, with a cooler title. But anyway, everybody have a great day. Click like, subscribe, follow. We'll see you on the next one.